Beginning our daf Masechta Seder Daf Chav Tes, beginning 15 lines down at the top of the Amud, we were in the middle of a discussion regarding halacha, of really a shas discussion regarding Safek Tumah b'Shus HaRabim b'Shus HaYachid, regarding the source of that limud, and regarding one of the specifics of that halacha of Safek Tumah, as it applies to Davar Sheyesh B'das Lishal, regarding that it has to be something that could be asked, that has intelligence. And then it has this unique halacha of Safek Tumah b'Shus HaYachid being considered as Tameh. Shares close by the Bekazich and the Chesed will turn from Daf Achayim, usually we turn to today's Daf. Some of the discussing today's Daf are like Safek Tumah b'Shus HaRabim, that when you don't know if there's Tumah, if there was Tumah, if it became Tameh, so if it's in the Shus HaRabim, the halacha is Sveikei Tar, but if it's Safek Tumah b'Shus HaYachid, then the halacha is Sveikei Tameh, and the Gemara discussed what the source from that was, which was the halacha of Seita, which she's obviously secluded in the Rishus HaYachid, and the Torah calls her Tameh. So you see that the Safek, which we're not sure, is considered as Tameh. And there's another halacha that was learned out, and the Gemara is now going to continue with another source for Davar Sheyesh B'das Lishal, regarding that it also requires that there's someone that has intelligence to be asked. Then it has the halacha that when it's also Rishus HaYachid, then the Safek is going to be Tameh. Then we continue on Amud Beis with the halacha of actually a different halacha of our Mishnah of Tumah, as it applies for Truma and for Kachim. That is, although generally the halacha of Tumah ends by a Sheni, there's a Aviyah Vaysa Tumah, which is a dead person, there's a Abba Tumah, like Shratzim and whoever touched a dead person, there's a Rishon, there's a Sheni, and then for Truma it could become a Shlishi, and for Kachim it could even be a Revi, and sometimes you could even have something called a Chamishi, like by Chatas. And we discussed the halacha of Tful Yoim regarding someone who immersed that day. What type of status in Tumah does he have? He has a very unique, like, he already toiveled, but he didn't have Her Shemesh. So for what halachas do we consider that of the Tful Yoim? So we begin the card of Chav Tes, 15 lines down at the top of the Amud. The Gemara had discussed regarding a doubtful Tumah, which involves a person who can be asked whether or not he is Tumah, was called Yesh B'das Lishal. So he said, B'Shus HaYachid, the Safek Tameh, B'Shus HaRabim, say Safek Star. But if the Ein B'das Lishal, then even B'Shus HaYachid, it's going to be just like B'Shus HaRabim, it's going to be Sveik, is going to be Tar. So the Gemara derived this from Saita, who is considered Vadei Tameh, and it has these two variables. She's obviously secluded, which is the Stira, which is B'Shus HaYachid, and she also has intelligence to be asked. Now the Gemara brings an alternate source for this halacha. Amar Rav Gidl Amar Rav says Davar Sheyesh B'das Lishal. This, that it requires something that has intelligence to be asked, did you become Tameh or not, versus that which does not have intelligence to be asked, meaning to say that the halacha of Safek Tumah b'Shus HaYachid is going to be Tameh. It's dafka by Yesh B'das Lishal. I'll tell you this source. It's not from Saita. Mehakra Nafka. You learn that from the pasuk in Vayikra. It's actually two different psukim. One pasuk says the Habasa, which is referring to the carbon, that sheyiga b'chol Tameh, that will touch anything that's Tameh. Okay. Lo ye'achel, it cannot be eaten. So the Gemara says, it sounds like from the pasuk, okay, v'adei tameh hu lo ye'achel. It says, if it touched the tameh, you know for sure became tameh, then it cannot be eaten. Hasafik tumah v'safik tahal. Let's say not sure if it became tameh or not. Sounds like ye'achel, you could eat it. Sounds like that safik tumah is tahal. Sounds like only if it was tameh. Problem is, Ema Seifa. Look at the pasuk. The end of the pasuk says, Basa, and the meat, kol tahal yochel basa. Whoever is tar could eat the meat. Wait, that sounds like vadei taru de yochel basa. Only someone that's definitively tar could eat the meat. Hasafik tumah b'safik tahal, but if you're not sure if he's tamei or tar, no, lo yochel cannot eat it. Sech v'shleinish. On the one hand, the first half of the pasuk sounds like when it is definitely tamei, then it's a problem. But if it's not definitely, it's okay. The end of the pasuk sounds like no, called tar. When it's definitely tar, then you can eat. But if not, then you can't. So how do we resolve the inconsistency in the pasuk itself? It depends. Depends what you're talking about. Are you talking about the meat, or are you talking about the person? Kan over here, when the pasuk mentions the Sheyesh B'das Lishal. When we're talking about when the pasuk says Kol Tar Yochel Basar, that we said only if it's for sure tar, then you could eat the meat. Yeah, that's talking about the Tumas Haguf, when the person the person has das lishal, you could ask him, did you become tummy? Then you have to be definitively tar, because if it's safek tumah, then when you're a person with intelligence, that's where we said the halacha of, we're going to say the suffix is going to be tummy. But kan, over here, when the pasuk says habasa shaliga, bechol tamei sounds like it's only a problem if it's certainly tamei, but when it's suffix, it's going to be okay. Oh, that's because it's she'emay das lishal. It does not have intelligence. The meat, what's touched, therefore the suffix is going to be tahar. So that's an alternate source from Basar Kodesh if we're going to require das lishal to say the halacha suffix tumah b'shas hayach is going to be tamei. Says the Gemara, the itzterich, you needed to have the Rav Gila Marav, which is the teaching we just brought now. The itzterich, the big Marav, I mean, the Gemara is basically asking, well, why do I need to have another source if I already learned it from Saita? That's where you have a person has intelligence. And that's where, when we have a suffix, we're going to say it's going to be tamei. Why do you need to learn it out from Basar Kodesh? Says the Gemara, you need to have both of them. Why? So the Gemara explains. If I only have this teaching of Rav that learns it out from these two different psukim of Basan regarding Kol Tahar, I would have said, okay, it doesn't differentiate in this pasuk regarding where the Tumah happened. So I would say that depending if you have Das Lishol or not, that you'll say the subject will be Tumah or will be Tar, will not make a difference if it's Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah. You'll always say that halacha. It took a minimum of Saita. No, from Saita we learned that where do we say that her suffix Tumah is going to be? His Tumah is only in the private area. That's where they're secluded. That's when you have Das Lishol and it's Rosh Hashanah. Then you're going to say the suffix is going to be Tumah. So therefore you need to have the limud from Saita. And the Ina Saita, and if you only had the limud from Saita, I would have said, wait a second. I would have thought to say that, has to have intelligence is what's touching the Tumah and what's causing the Tumah. Because by Saita, both of the individuals have intelligence. You have intelligence by the woman who is becoming tamei, and the boil who is being metame is an intelligent creature. So I would have thought to say only then will you say Safek Toma Bishas Yachid is tamei Kamash Malon Rav Gidol, who learns out from Kol Tahar that only if you're Tahar, but if you're a Safek you cannot eat the meat because the person who might have become tamei has intelligence. But the metame, you don't need to see any intelligence, and therefore that's what we needed to have Rav Gidol's halacha to tell you tzricha that no, you need to have the one who maybe became tamei to have intelligence, not the one that's being metame, and also you learn it from Satan that has to be b'shus hayachid. So those two halachas of yesh b'das lishal, we need to learn that from both, from that of Satan to say it's dafka b'shus hayachid, and we need Rav Gidol halacha to tell you that dafka the nitma has to have intelligence, but not the mitam. Now the Gemara continues on, which we had mentioned many halachas in the Mishnah of boy bayond, that what was said the day when Eliezer ben Azariah was appointed as a nasi. So one of the drashas was Dasha B'Kiva. What happens is that there's, like we mentioned before, there's certain categories and various degrees of tumah. You have an Abba tumah, either a primary source of tumah such as a sheret or a person who contacted a corpse. You have a rishla tumah, anything that comes in contact with an Abba tumah. Again, that's how when tumah is transferred, it gets lowered. And then you have a shein tumah, anything that comes in contact with a rishla tumah. So now our Gemara is going to discuss the possibility of truma kach becoming a shlish or even a revi degrees of tumah, both for that of truma and of kachim. So Rabbi Kiva darshan that, as we mentioned in the Mishnah, it says any earthenware vessel that is going to fall inside of it a source of tumah, like a shevet, whatever's inside of it, we said, although it means will become tameh, but no, don't read it as yitma, but yitame will transmit the tumah further. So that's teaching. So we keep in the Mishnah, limit al kikar sheni, which if the shevet is a avatama, if the shevet, the oven is a rishon, that makes the kikar, the bread that's there, a sheni, and it's saying yitame, whatever's inside will be metama other things. Shemitama sashlish. That was the learning. That was the teaching that we had from Rabbi Kiva in the Mishnah. So that's where our Gemara begins on that. So, well, really, truth is, just to phrase the Mishnah a little bit more. So on that, Rabbi Shua said, "Mi gala offer menecha b'yichem zaka." Where? Why? He said that there's going to be a generation that's going to purify a loaf of bread that's a shlishi, that it's not going to be tummy. Because you have no source from the Torah that's going to become tummy. Hi, but the Rabbi Kiva Talmidcha, he brings a pasuk from the Torah that's tummy. Shenema kol asher b'toicha yitma, which we're learning as yitame. So how could you say that there would be such a thing even by chulin? Forget about truma. He's saying it becomes a shlishi because, like we're saying, instead of reading yitma, he says yitame. That was what we said in the Mishnah. So it says the Gemara is asking on Rabbi Yochanan in Zaka. He said that there's going to become a generation that they're going to be mitaher a shlishi from truma, from being considered as tummy. But he himself held it as tummy. Now, since he does not have a source from the Torah, so Lama Tami, this is a little bit, we're going to get until the end of the daf, a little bit of the difficulties of the Tumah Tahara Sukkis. It's not going to go on for that much longer, but so the question is, since he doesn't have a pasuk from the Torah, so Lama Tami, why does he say that a Truma becomes a Shlishi? So maybe the Merabi says, yeah. Mina Torah enloy. There's no pasuk that tells you Truma could become a Shlishi, but Medin Kal V'chayim Yeshloi. But there is a Kal V'chayim. What's the Kal V'chayim? So it gets a little complex. Says the Gemara like this. Umat V'ol Yoim, and you just have to remember the terminology, not to confuse what we're talking about. So we're starting over at Tvul Yoim. What's a Tvul Yoim? Tvul Yoim is someone who was Tameh, he tabled in the mikveh that day, and he didn't have sundown yet. Okay, what's the halacha with a Tvul Yoim? Like this. Shemuta b'chulin. There's no prohibition of a tumah for chulin, let's say even Ma'aser Sheni, for a Tvul Yoim to touch. As the Gemara says in Yavamas, there's 3 psukim that are written. And the way the Gemara resolves it over there is like this. There's 3 stages in the Tahara. The guy goes and toivos and he comes out of the mikveh, he's right away permitted for chulin and ma'aser. When he has Herb Shemesh sundown, the opening mission in Shas, he's allowed to eat truma. When he brings his kapara, let's say by Mechusei Kippurim, certain people, they have to bring a carbon the following day. That's for tumah. When you bring your carbon, then you're permitted to partake of kachim. So there's 3 stages. Going to the mikveh, sundown, and bring your carbon the next day. That allows you for stage number 1, allows you for chulin, and when we call it chulin, it means also ma'aser. Then truma by sundown, and kachim the next day. So, says the Gemara like this. If by Tvul Yom is permitted in chulin, Paisla b'truma, a Tvul Yom, like we said, he's considered tamei for truma. So he's going to make truma puzzle. So, Kikar Sheni, and we're not explaining really at this point what does that mean. Does it mean the Tvul Yom is like a Sheni, and he's making truma it's like a Shlishi? Because Tvul Yom is really, he was an Avatom or whatever it was, and he toivel. But the point is, he's forbidden the truma. He'll make truma puzzle. But if we find that he's mutachul, then he's going to invalidate truma. So Kikar Sheni. So a loaf of bread, that is a Sheni, right? Obviously, a loaf of bread could become a Sheni. It should possible chulin. That meaning chulin could become a Sheni. Now, the pasuk says, Kol asher b'toicha yitma, which whatever is inside the oven, when the sheretz falls inside, will become tamei. So that includes everything. Chulin, which is Ma'aser Sheni, Truma, Kachim, they're all included, that the loaf of bread could become a Sheni. Oh, so Eina Din isn't, remember, he's not going with Rabbi Kiva's drasha, the Yitma reading as Yitama. It means Yitma, whatever's inside the oven will become tamei, meaning the loaf of bread will become a Sheni. So Eina Din Sheyasa Shlishi B'Truma, isn't it a Kal V'chayim that this loaf of bread should make truma that it touches into a shlishi? What's the Kal V'chayim? Like we just said, a Tvul Yom is permitted chulin. Doesn't make chulin problematic. A sheni that would be problematic for a chulin, meaning chulin can become a sheni. So if it's going to make a chulin into a sheni, meaning this loaf of bread will become tummy as chulin, isn't it a kabel chayma that it's going to make truma into a shlishi? Which Rashi right away addresses the question that everyone might be asking. Says what's called dayoy. Wait a second. How are you going to make truma into a shlishi? Maybe it'll make truma into a sheni. That would be the kabel chayma. If sheni is a problem for chulin, well, for sure should be a problem for truma. How could you say that it'll make shlishi a truma into a shlishi? That's a bigger chiddush. Says Rashi, no. If you would say what's called dayu, to say leave the kabel chaymer to make truma into a sheni, then you're going to be mevatel the kabel chaymer. Why? You don't need a kabel chaymer anymore, because to tell me truma is a sheni, I know from the pasuk just like chulin, because the pasuk says whatever's going to fall into the oven. Whatever's in the oven when the sheretz fell, it's a sheretz za'av, the oven is a rishon, and whatever's inside, whatever loaf of bread, chulin or truma, is going to be a sheni. That I know from the pasuk. I don't need a kabel chaymer from Tvul Yoim to say that Tvul Yoim is not a problem for chulin, yet it's a problem for truma. So a loaf of bread that's a sheni is going to be a problem for chulin, for sure the problem for truma. I don't need it. I know that from the pasuk. So the Gemara Baba Kama of Chavei tells us wherever the kabel chaymer would be refuted by saying dayai, you don't say dayai. So that means that we're removing the clause of dayai to allow the kabel chaymer to happen. That makes me say that, if the loaf of bread is a sheni b'chulin, then I'm going to say the truma is going to be a shlishi. So that's the kabel chaymer that says the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Mazaka, how does he know that a sheni makes a shlishi b'truma? He says it's going to become a dar. They're going to say shlishi is not a problem b'truma. But he held it was a problem. What's his source? It doesn't say a pasuk. Kabel chaymer. What's the kabel chaymer? Kabel chaymer from Tvul Yoim. Tvul Yoim is mutter b'chulin but asa b'truma. A sheni loaf of bread that's chulin and it's a problem. Kabel chaymer will make a shlishi of truma. But you can refute this kabel chaymer. Why? Malat Tvul Yoim. What do you learn here from Tvul Yoim? And you want to show me there from there? Somebody mutter b'chulin, it's asa truma for sure over here by a sheni. No, she can have a tumah. For example, someone became tummy from a dead person, or he was a zav. All these parashas we have now in Tazir Mitzayra or Mitzayra, where their tumah is an ava tumah. Okay, can verstehen leiden that even though the mutter b'chulin, but it's going to be a problem with truma. Who's going to say by a sheni loaf, which is not an ava tumah? Who said you're going to make the truma puzzle? That's what I was saying. When you say the word puzzle usually means it cannot contaminate something further. As we'll explain shortly, the difference in the terminology of psul and tameh. So we say Tvul Yoim makes truma puzzle, which essentially is like making it into a shlishi. Let's say, even though Tvul Yoim is an av himself, he was an av. Now after he told, what is he? He's a sheni. Okay, whatever it is, but he's going to make the truma only puzzle. But I could understand because he was an avadom, he was a zav, he was a metayra, so he can make truma puzzle. But how are you going to bring a kabel chaymer to a sheni? Yeah, I know he's problematic for chulin. But who is the kabel chaymer? No kabel chaymer. Yeah, you can't learn off from avadom. Yeah, he's mutter b'chulin, fine, because he toible. But okay, he could make truma possible. What are you going to prove to a sheni loaf? So the Gemara doesn't like the kabel chaymer. Says the Gemara.
Maybe he becomes like a sheni once he toible.
Yeah, but even if you'll say it became like a sheni, aber kommt von der Avatum. Es gewähnt an Avatum, es gewähnt a Zav, a Metzere, a Tomim Es. So he can make truma puzzle. But who said this loaf of bread? There was never an Avatum. The loaf of bread was a sheni, a leidige, nidderige sheni. Who said he can make truma puzzle? So the Gemara says, okay, tasty, but learn it out as Getim Tamid Beis, mit Tvul Yoim the Sheretz. Not a Tvul Yoim of, let's say, there was a zav, a zova, mitzayra. No, a person touched a sheretz. Now that person, a sheretz itself is nor avatum. The person who touched the sheretz is a rishon tumah. He was never an avatum. When he tables, he's not permitted for chulin and ma'aser sheni, but he's asa for truma, even to touch it, because as Rashi brings, even by kalim, it says a halacha requiring sundown. As the pasuk says, "Meikra b'mayim yuva," it's going to be brought into water. But tamei ad ha'erev, it's going to be tamei till the evening and then vitar. Now that says Rashi, that pasuk is talking about for touching, to utilize it for truma. So we see that even the kli that's a Tvul Yoim, which is a rishon, is going to be puzzled up until Herev Shemesh. So you see that something that's not an avatuma will make Truma Pasul. So don't slug up my Kavuchem saying, oh, it comes from the Avatuma. Nicht giving can Avatuma. He was a Rishon, and still is Mutter v'chulin, and is also for Truma. So then you could say the same thing over here by the Sheni, that it can make a Shlishi, and that will be my Kavuchem from a Tvul Yom of Sheretz. Not a Tvul Yom of Sheretz, and he touched the Sheretz. And he's a Rishon, so you see that even over there, it's going to make Truma Pasul. Says the Gemara, okay, but I still don't like Yom HaChaim. Why? Mal Tvul Yom Sheretz, what do you find by someone who is a Tvul Yom? He told that day from coming contact with a Sheretz. She came b'minoi avatuma, at least the type of category that became tummy from the Sheretz, at least its category could become an avatuma, meaning, as Rashi explains, if this kli or person would have touched a mess, right? A mess is what's called a via voice, a zayda of tuma. He would have became, the kli or the person, an avatuma, which can then contaminate people and vessels to become a rishon. What are you going to say by a food item? Meretzach from a loaf of bread, a kikar, a sheni kikar, a second degree level of tumah. That cannot become an avatuma. A loaf of bread can never become an avatuma, even if it touches a dead person. Because the pasuk says in Mamid B'Yotas, whatever touches the dead person, Yitma will become tummy. Now it's from that pasuk that we learn out that a tamei mess, someone who touched a dead person, could then contaminate people and vessels. Now obviously that the tamei mess has to be something that could become tar by toveling in the mikvah. How do I know that? Because the pasuk before that said, "V'hiza hatar al hatamei v'rochatz b'mayim." The tar person will spray and purify the tummy person, which is with the paraduma ash waters, and then you bathe him in the water. Which teaches me something that has tar in the mikvah could become an avatama by touching the dead person. But that excludes food items and beverages and earthenware vessels which cannot be tevel in the mikvah. You can't take a loaf of bread and tevel in the mikvah. There's no tara for food items. So wait a second. Even if you're going to tell me it's Tvul Yom of Sheretz, it's a person or it's a vessel, that's something that has at least, it's the type of thing that could become an avatar. Because if it would touch a dead person, it would become. So even if right now it's a rishon because it touched only a sheretz, still, since it's min, its species, could be an avatoma. So maybe that's because that's the only place you have a Tvul Yom, right? You have a Tvul Yom by food, you can't. We're trying to learn out a concept of that, a Kavuchayma.
After he goes to mikveh, he's Tvul Yom. He's still until
the sundown.
So he's still mitan. He can still be mitan.
So he's in this very interesting status called Tvul Yom, which is we're middle of discussing. He's mutter for chulin and ma'aser sheni, but he's also for truma.
Okay.
So he'll make truma into like a shlishi, if we'll call it that. But we're trying to say, aha, Kavuchayma. What's the Kavuchayma? We're trying to find the source. This is where it's a very technical daf. Virchim Zakai had said that Truma could become a Shlishi. He said a door is going to come and they're going to say Truma is not a problem. Shlishi, Ich zog is ya. Chveis is giving it's going to be a door later that's going to make it. And the Tarfin told him, what says Rabbi Kiva says even Chulin could become a Shlishi. What sagst du Rabbi Zakai? Okay. But Agma is trying to figure out, what's halt Rabbi Zakai? If a hat a makar, where does he have a source that it's a Shlishi? It doesn't say it in the Torah. So the Gemara is saying, hey, it's a Kavuchayma. What's the Kavuchayma? Tvul Yom. What says Tvul Yom? Well, Tvul Yom, he's permitted in the Chulin. Doesn't make Chulin Ma'aser Sheni forbidden. Yet he makes Truma Pasul. So Kikar Sheni, which it's a problem in the Chulin, Zich is going to make Truma into a Shlishi. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? That's Tvul Yom is an Avatum. So no, nicht a Avatum. He touched the Sheretz. He's only a Rishon. So now our Gemara is saying, yeah, before what is becoming a Tvul Yom is something that its min could become an avatoma. Because if it would have touched a dead person, him, the vessel, the person, or whatever, would become an avatoma. So even though now it's only a rishon, but the minoy is avatoma. It's species, so it makes it a higher level thing. Maybe it could be mitame, as Rashi went through the details to show that only somebody that could have tara in the mikvah could become a tamei mess. So it could become an avatoma from touching a dead person. but food items can never become an avatama. So what are you telling me that if it's volume of even sheretz could be metame teruma, even though it's not a problem chulin? Kal v'chayme for kikar sheni, which is a problem chulin. For sure, should make shlishi into teruma into shlishi. What are you talking about? Food can never, a loaf of bread can never become an avatama. So maybe it cannot make the truma into shlishi. There's no kal v'chayme from a tvul yom, even a tvul yom of sheretz. Says the Gemara, no. An earthenware vessel will disprove the logic that you're telling me. Why? Because a klicheres also can never become an avatar. Why not? Because as we just brought in the previous Rashi, only something which could be toivel in the mikveh is able to become an avatar. A klicheres cannot be toivel in the mikveh, you have to break it. And even so, it makes truma tamei when it's a rishon. For sure that it makes it puzzle, meaning into a shlishi. Also, you shouldn't wonder regarding kikar sheni, a loaf of bread that's a sheni. Where even though that it can never become an avatuma, it should also make truma into a shlishi. Because obviously the reason is not because like you're trying to tell me, because no, you're learning from Tvul Yom, it's an avatuma, or b'mina avatuma. That's not the svara. That's not true. Klicheres is not b'minoy avatuma, and yet it makes truma puzzle. So bazokste, that can't be the way you're going to refute my kavachayma. Says no, it's not true, because malik klicheres. Maybe the truth is no. There is a chumra that Tvul Yom has, because b'minoy avatuma, and maybe that's the only reason why it'll make a truma into a shlishi. Bazokste klicheres. Do you see klicheres doesn't have b'minoy avatuma, and it'll make truma puzzle? Yeah, because she came with Tamaviroi. Klicheres has a different chumrah. Klicheres is a very unique chumrah that anything that's in its ear space is tameh. You don't have that by a kikar sheni. So maybe that's why klicheres will be make something into shlishi. Says the Gemara, yeah, but Tvul Yom mechiach. But Tvul Yom will disprove what you're saying, because a wooden or metal vessel that is able to be toivel doesn't have tumah from its ear space. And even so, it makes truma puzzle. So you can't tell me the svara of why would be machmer would be based on the svara of ear space, because you see that kli shatef, other vessels don't have that, and still it's going to make truma puzzle. So this is what's called v'chayzer adin. So the logic goes back and forth. Loi re'izeh, you don't have the characteristic of the tvul yoin k're'izeh, like the characteristic of an earthenware vessel. In other words, to say that the reason why it's going to make truma puzzle, meaning like into shlishi, is dependent because it contaminates from its airspace, you can't say that's the reason, because Tvul Yom does not contaminate from its airspace and still it makes truma puzzle. On the same way, you go the other way too. You don't have the characteristic of an earthenware vessel to say, because its species is an avatuma. That's not k're'izeh like the characteristic of a Tvul Yom. In other words, you can't say that the reason why a Tvul Yom makes truma puzzle is because it's min as avatuma. That's not true, because you don't have that chomer by klicheres, and even so, it is puzzle. So this is what's called hatzara shaveh sheben. So we go to the common denominator. You have to find the stringency that's equal by both of them to say, that'll be the reason why they make truma puzzle. Now, what's the common denominator of both of them? So the girsa we have is shemutachin b'chulin, but Rashi first brings a different girsa, and he doesn't like this girsa of shemutachin b'chulin. He says shemetamin. These two things contaminate. Where do we find that? So Rashi says at Tvul Yom we find it. It's called tameh. It says the pasuk in Vayikra uvah hashemesh v'tahar. It says that when the sun is going to set, then it's going to be tar. Obviously, the evidence says up until now that it was considered tameh. And the klicheres, where do we find the klicheres is also considered tameh? It's a pasuk, Tana v'kichayim yutots temeimei, that the oven and the stove, which were made out of earthenware, are tamei. So we see that both of them are mitame, and we also find upaislim betruma, that they make truma pasla, as we just established. So zog the Gemara kolshkin, all the more so. This is what the kavachem is. Kikir sheni, the loaf of bread that's a sheni, that's more puzzle than by it makes more psul than by Tvul Yom. Why? Because the puzzle b'chulin, and it makes a problem even b'chulin, which is tamei, and it said even chulin like sheni are problematic to become a sheni. Oh, so all the more so that's a kavachayim the paisel betruma. But for sure it's going to make truma possible. Now, Rashi says all the farms say the girsa we have in our Gemara that atzad shavash shebehen it's that it's mutter b'chulin and paisel betruma. But says Rashi, according to that version, it would be impossible to explain which kli cheres is mutter b'chulin but is paisel betruma. He says he wouldn't know what the case is. He says, but you could explain with a kli cheres that's surrounded with a tightly fastened seal, which it would save for the chulin that's inside of it, but it wouldn't save for the truma that's inside of it. But he says there's many gimgumin and shuvas and bittul sheet. It's like a magish, but when he goes through all arichas to explain why he doesn't like that, so he prefers his girsa, that the common denominator of tvul yoim and of the other case. From these two, the common denominator of kli cheres and tvul yoim is that they're metamin and they're paisel betruma. So kol v'chaimer for kikich sheni, where it's also paisel b'chulin, for sure it's going to paisel betruma. That's the kol v'chaimer Rabbi Yochanan held tells you that a truma could become a shlishi. So although you wouldn't know it's straight from tvul yoim, or you wouldn't know it's straight from kli cheres, the common denominator of them teaches me that the same thing would apply to a kikar sheni. But says the Gemara, but what did Rabbi Yochanan say? That's going to come a generation that they're not going to like this kavachayim because they're going to ask, what are you telling me? What's from the common denominator? Shekin yesh b'tzad chamo. But each one of them has a stringency that doesn't apply by kikar sheni. Tvul yom has a stringency that it's min has avatuma, and kli cheres has a stringency that's mitamah mavichai, which is not the case by kikar sheni. So maybe that's why kikar sheni should not make truma into shlishi. He does not consider that as a pircha, because if both don't have the same chumrah, obviously it's not the reason to make it into the stringency of making the truma into shlishi. Because the other one doesn't have that svab, has something else, but that obviously not the reason. And therefore that's the machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and the Dor Acharon regarding if we'll say from a kavachayma the truma will become a shlishi or not. Okay, that finishes this part of the Gemara. Now we continue on with a related discussion regarding making kachim into a revi. So we just had a discussion into making truma into a shlishi, which even the Mishnah said b'chulin to become a shlishi. Rabbi Yochanan is not going to help truma to become a shlishi. The Acharon held that no, even truma is not going to become a shlishi because they don't like the kavachaymer. But time to learn the brisa. Rabbi Yasi. What's medrabanan?
Are we talking about become shlishi with the rabbanon or the raisa?
Kavachaymer.
So it becomes a deraisa now?
Yeah.
Hopefully he also becomes a shlishi with the raisa.
Right.
Now I'm going to work on the
So Amar B'Yasi says, "Menayim l'revi b'kodesh shapasel." How do we know that a next level? It could even go one step further. That kachim could become a revi. That's gonna be possible. Meaning, and we don't say that it's all like truma. In other words, meiser and chulin they max out after sheni. Once it touches something else, it's not gonna make it tummy. Truma, like we just mentioned a second ago, maxes out by shlishi. We brought a source like kabbalah and Torah. How do the kachim will go even one step further? Can become a revi. Says the Gemara v'dinu. I'll bring you a kabbalah. Here we go again with this cheshbon. Ma mechutzi kippurim. Now, just a moment ago, we were going through a whole cheshbon with a tefil yom. A tefil yom is something to turn that day. Now we're talking about what's called a mechutzi kippurim. A mechutzi kippurim is someone who there are certain tumas that require karbanas, like zav and zava and yoledis mitzvah. That's what last week's parasha mitzvah that they need karbanas. They're lacking atonement. So already you went to the mikveh, you already had sundown, but you gotta wait for the next day to bring your carbon. If we find by mechutzi kippurim shemuta b'truma, because you already had sundown, you're permitted with truma. Pasal b'kodesh, still you make it a problem for kadishim, as the Gemara learns on Yevamos daf ayin dalam abeis. Oh, so then shlishi shepasal b'truma, a shlishi itself, which can make truma problem, meaning a truma could become a shlishi, as we just learned a moment ago, a kavachaymer from a tvul yoim. Einer dinu, isn't it a kavachaymer sheyasu revi b'kodesh that it should make kachim at revi? Which again, Rashi says, wait a second, how can you say it'll make the next step? Dayan love and minadin liis kanidin. Maybe say that no, that just like shlishi is a problem for truma, it'll be a problem for kachim too. Says Rashi, no. Here, like we said before, because then you've been mevatel the kavachaymer. Because I don't need to bring a source that kachim could become a shlishi, because as Rashi says, 2 steps in this. Why I don't need to have a kavachaymer for that. Because I don't have to tell you that just like you learned that truma from a kavachaymer from Tvul Yaim. So obviously, if you're learning a truma as a kavachaymer from Tvul Yaim, kachim, which is more chomer than truma, most definitely would be having that same kavachaymer to become a shlishi. But says the Gemara, no, even in that Torah I know it. So zich, I don't need to have the kavachaymer to teach me you can become a shlishi. Because where do I know in that Torah? Because einay dinhu. Says the Gemara, because the Gemara says, because v'lamanu shlishi l'kodesh min Torah. Because I have a source that kashim can become a shlishi from the Torah. Therefore, if I would say dayoi, well, obviously the whole kavachaymer would be out the door. So must be v'revi mekavachaymer. So if I'm learning kavachaymer from Mechutz Kippurim, that is not a problem with truma, and it is a problem with kachim. Zich is telling me that a truma, that shlishi, will make a kachim into revi. Says Gemara, "Was hey shlish the kodesh mater?" No, where do you have a source that a kachim can become a shlish from the Torah? I'll bring you a pasuk. The chassidus says the pasuk in Vayikra. Says va'abasa sheyiga b'chol tamei. We've quoted this before. The meat that's going to touch anything that's tamei, lo yeachel, should not be eaten. Says the Gemara like this: Mila is going. Aren't we talking about? In other words, can't we explain that it's even talking about that this meat, this kachim, the naga b'sheni, that it touched a shein l'tamah? How do we know that? Because Rashi says, because the pasuk said b'chol tamei. Now, a sheni is called tamei. Because as you recall, we said, kol yitma, when the sheretz, which is a av, falls into the oven, which becomes a rishon. We said whatever is inside, including the loaf of bread, will become tamei, which means the loaf of bread is a sheni. And the pasuk is calling it b'chol tamei. Oh, okay. So we're saying that when this pasuk is so much shlamim, which is kachim, we said if this meat touches b'chol tamei, which is touching a sheni, but that kachim meat was a shlishi because it touched a sheni, because it's b'chol tamei. B'chol tamei is whatever is tamei, and what the Torah calls a sheni tamei. So you already have a source in the Torah that kachim becomes shlishi. So revi is mekal v'chem kedamah. Right? If I'm having a kavachaymer from Mechutz Kippurim, it's obviously teaching regarding revi because for shlishi I don't need a source. Because let alone that kavachaymer that taught me for truma I would know. I even have a pasuk for kachim that it's a shlishi. Okay. Amar Yechanan, Zok Rabbi Yechanan, Tam beribi. The reasoning of the great one, the Rabbi Yesi, who we just quoted now, he was the chacham and the gadol adar. Says his reasoning, any day amahu, says I don't understand how he's learning that you'll make kachim into revi from this kavachaymer from Mechutz Kippurim. Because shachit tshuva sebetzidai. The tshuva, the refutation is right there on the side. What's the refutation? As follows. Oichel haba machmas tvul yain. If you have a food item that touched a tvul yain, and let's say it was kachim or it was truma, and it touched some of the table that day, you have to remember what we're talking about. Tvul yain. Guy was tummy, you tell me that day. Yoichiach will disprove the logic that Rabbi Yisi said. I'll show you. That food item, she'posel betruma, min ha-Torah, as we explained in the beginning of the Amid, becomes posel. Why? Because by Kalim also it says, Herav Shemesh regarding truma, which is only regarding touching. So this food item is posel for truma that touched the tvul yain. Yet ve'ena eisur revi b'kodesh, it doesn't make kachim into revi. I mean, you wanted to tell me if something is a problem with truma, then it's going to make the next level.
So what is it when it touches the tvul yom? What
It
category?
becomes posel.
Possible you burn it. It's also
Yeah, but it
good.
won't contaminate something further.
And what happens
not
to
gonna
it?
make it.
Asapahano.
What?
Asapahano. Asapahano.
Yeah, no, it's whatever. Yeah. Tell me whatever. But what we're trying to just show, we're trying to disprove the logic of Rabbi Yisi. Rabbi Yisi said that, if something that's possible b'truma, most definitely that it's going to make, and he wanted to prove this from a Mechutz Kippurim, that it's going to make kachim into a revi, meaning if something's making something into a shlishi, which is a problem for truma, zich is going to make kachim into a revi. But you have by a tvul yain, which we brought on the top of the Amid by Rashi, that a tvul yoim will make whatever it is, kachim or truma, into a shlishi, because meaning a tvul yoim makes something puzzle, doesn't make it tummy, it makes it puzzle, it'll make it into a shlishi, but it will not make the kachim into a revi. That disproves the whole logic of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi's whole logic was based on the principle that, I see by Mechusik Yibum, it's not a problem for it's not a problem for truma yet. It's a problem for kachim. Zich, if something a problem for kachim for truma, then it's going to make kachim into one more severe. That's what we're trying to prove. This halacha of making a revi b'kodesh from a kabbalah. He says no. You see, by an oichel that touched the tvul yaim, which that oichel, let's say with truma or kachim, whatever it is, we're going to consider as puzzle. It will not make kachim into revi, and we're going to prove this in a moment. Which that goes according to the Rabbanu who disagree in Abba Shal. And they say a tvul yoim, and this is what I was talking about before, there's a word called pasal and there's a word called tamei. A tvul yoim is paisel b'kodesh. He's not metame. What's the difference? Metame means when the thing that becomes tamei could now invalidate something else that touches it. Pasal is it becomes tamei, but it's the end of the line. So this food item that touched the tvul yaim, a tvul yaim is like his very interesting status. He's not all there, he's tired. He went to the mikvah, but he didn't have sundown. So he's something like a sheni, like we said, but whatever it is, he makes the thing he touches possible. But that's it. He will not make a next level. He will not make kachim into a revi. Whatever that item that's being touched, whether it be a kachim or truma that's becoming possible, will not make kachim into a revi. Because as Rashi explains, the Gemara at this point assumes that Rabbi Yossi holds like Rabbanan. And holds like Rabbanan, so therefore your refutation is right there. Because if that's the case, Rabbi Yossi, so the same Kabbalah Chomer that you should make should be then here also. That this food item that became possible because of touch of tvul yoim should now go ahead and make kachim into a revi. Because if you find a mechusik yibum, which is permitted for truma, it make kachim possible. So the oichel that touched tvul yoim that's possible by truma isn't a kabbalah chomer should make kachim to revi, but it's not like that. We don't say that. We say that's the end of the line. This thing that became tummy from the tvul yoim does not go and now make kachim to revi. Shabbat b'tzidoi. Then obviously there's no such kabbalah chomer, because then you say kabbalah chomer here also. The time they learn the Bryce, the Gemara brings this as a machlekes and assumes that Rabbi Yossi is like Rabbanan, and if he's like Rabbanan, so you obviously we don't hold your kabbalah chomer. So Bazoksta that you see that Revi becomes a kachim becomes Revi kabbalah chomer from the case of Mechusik Yibum, there is no such kabbalah chomer. Why? Because Abba Shalom like this. Tvul yoim, again, this is very complex. Each detail over here is really its own idea, but we're going to try to keep it as salient for what we're discussing here. Tvul yoim, again, a guy who taival in the mikveh that day, he's tchilul HaKodesh. What does that mean, he's tchilul HaKodesh? So Rashi explains that they made a maila for kachim, that a tvul yoim will be considered like a rishon l'tumah in regard to kachim. What's the difference? Because the higher you up, the more levels you still have to go for contracting, and also in the higher level tumah you have even, it's more severe in what the tumah was. So we consider you like a rishon for kachim, which, as Abba Shal explains what that means, which is l'tam mishnayim. It'll make tumah kachim one from the other, meaning, like Rashi explains, a food item that touches a tvul yoim, we're going to treat the tvul yoim for kachim like a rishon, meaning he was an avatuma, let's say. Because you could table, okay, you're not an avatuma, but we're going to treat it like a rishon. So therefore, the first item that he touched becomes a sheni, which then makes the next item that touches him to a shlishi. And they're both called tamei because they could contaminate something else. Because v'liftul echad, it makes the shlishi makes the revi puzzle, which makes itself problematic, but it cannot go ahead and invalidate other things that touch it. So essentially, Abba Shal is saying that we're going to go take it all the way to revi because the tvul yoim we're going to treat him like a rishon, which makes the food item that touch him into a sheni, which makes the next one into a shlishi, that's being metame too, and making the fourth one, the last one into revi of puzzle. That's Abba Shal. On that, Remeir, he says that no, we treat the tvul yoim like a regular sheni, which will make truma puzzle, and whatever touches that will make it puzzle for kachim. So to a tvul yoim, that invalidates truma, he's metami echad, that whoever touches him will make it tumah for kachim, upaisel echad, and they'll make only one more pasal, meaning, because since he's a sheni, he'll make one kachim into tumah, which makes it into shlishi, and the reason why it's called tumah because they'll pass it on one more and make the last one pasal into revi. That's the opinion of Rameir. So Abba Shaul says he's a rishon for kachim. Rameir says no, it's like a sheni. The third opinion, which is really the main one that we want, they say no. Just like the Tvul Yom, all he does is make pasal beverages and food items of truma. Kach paisel, this is a very key word. Paisel oichle kodesh umashki kodesh. So too he makes the beverages of kachim and food items. He makes it only pasal, and the one who touches the Tvul Yom will not make kachim pasal. Only it itself will become pasal. Oh, wait a second. That refutes the Kal V'chomer. Because you're showing me a halacha of an eichel hanegea b'tvul yoim. That is problematic for truma, but it's not going to make kachim one level more severe. But Rabbi Yossi, that was your whole halacha, was based on the svara of mechutz kippurim. That it's not a problem. He went to the mikveh already. He's waiting just for his carbon to be brought. He's next in line to bring his carbon the next day. It's possible for kachim if he touches the kachim. But for truma, he's okay. Oh, you want to make a kavachim? He says, that's okay for truma. It's problematic for kachim. So a shlishi, which is possible for truma, alachas kama v'kama so mamachin, no, ein madrege mer for kachim to become a revi. There's no such svara. Look at the halacha of Eichel HaNegei B'Tvul Yom. Eichel HaNegei B'Tvul Yom is possible for Teruma, and it does not make kachim one level more severe. It does not become a Revi. So it refutes your logic. Says the Gemara, what shlokes to up Rabbi Yossi from the Chachamim? He says, Maskeler Papa, he says, Mimai did Rabbi Yossi K'Rabbanan Tzvilei? Who said Rabbi Yossi was a Rabbanan that you're saying, Tshuva B'Tzidoi, was Dr. Rabbi Yossi, Frank Rabbi Yechanan, Tshuva B'Tzidoi? What are you talking about? Did Abba Shaul Tzvilei? Maybe it was like Abba Shaul. Which is, Dama that he says, L'tamei Shnayim, L'lipsel Echad. Abba Shaul says clearly that this case is going to make a revi of kachim. He says we even make the Tvul Yom into Arishain, and it's going to be Matame Shnayim, Melipsel Echad, but it's going to go all the way to revi Bakachim. So it is. So that's actually clear support for this halacha of Rabbi Yossi and the source of this idea of making kachim into revi. What shlaks to up from the Chacham? Which Rashi says the truth is Rapapa could have also said maybe he holds like Remeir, and also there wouldn't be Tshuva B'Tzidoi because he also holds it makes it into revi. He just says you start from a sheni, not from a rishain. But says Rashi, yeah, we're just saying a bigger chiddush. In other words, who's to tell you that we're not going to be machma like Abba Shaul? Maybe even like Abba Shaul he holds that a eichel abba machmas tvul yom, if it's of kachim, could even be metame echad a paisel echad, where the one that touched it, it becomes pasal deraisa. Even if the first one is truma, it's going to be placed of a kachim. As we said, a kavachama from mechusik kipurim, like Rabbi Yossi Darshan, and he also says the same thing over here. If you find a mechusik kipurim which is permitted by truma, it's going to be possible kachim. So a eichel truma that comes because of a tvul yom that's possible by truma isn't a kavachama, should make it be kachim. So therefore, the Gemara is asking back. It said, "V'azak tshuvasa b'tzidoi." Who said he holds like Chacham? He holds like Abba Shaul, or maybe at least holds like Remeir. Says the Gemara, no. I'll tell you why he held tshuvasa b'tzidoi. It cannot be that he holds like Abba Shaul. Why not? I'll tell you. If you think to say he holds like Abba Shaul, that from a Kavachayma Mechusik Kippurim, we're going to say that the first one is pasal, and from a rabbinic ma'ila, you're going to say that it's going to make it tamei to go all the way to Revi, because, so you tell me midday raisa, you're going to say it's pasal the one that it touches. So then, laisi l'Revi b'kodesh, there's a little bit of a technical point. Then laisi l'Revi b'kodesh, why would Rabbi Yossi be bringing his source as he brought Revi b'kachim from Mechusik Kippurim? Laisi l'Revi b'kodesh, then you should bring the halacha that kachim can become Revi ma'oichel sheba machmas tvul yom, from the halacha of a food item that came because of tvul yom. which is the halacha that Abba Shaul said. And we'll explain in a second why that's a better source. If, and it's even a bigger chiddush too, and that's what the Gemara's point is trying to say. If you hold like Abba Shaul zok a revi b'kodesh, and there's an added chiddush here. If a food item that came because of a tvul yom, the tvul yom gufei, where's the oichel coming from? From a tvul yom. That's the source of its tumah. And the tvul yom itself is mutter b'chulin. As we said all along in this daf. Tvul yom went to the mikvah, he's already permitted a meiser sheni and chul. And still, Amrit, you say, it can make kachim into revi. In other words, it's going to make kachim puzzle from a kabbalah from a chutzi kippurim. Oh, if that's the case, then oich, let's get tint up with lama red aleph of a shlishi, a third degree food item. Let's say of truma. Habomach masheni. What's the source of tuma of the oich shlishi? It's coming from a sheni. The sheni gufe asa b'chulin. Its source, which the sheni is itself asa b'chulin. Ein adin isn't a kabbalah sha'isir revi b'kodesh. There should be kashmir revi. So, like Rashi explains, the question that we're asking is he can't only got. You want to answer me that Rabbi Yechon's question not difficult Rabbi Yechon because Vazak they had like maybe all like Abba Shaul. What do you mean? You can't say it was like Abba Shaul. Because if he had like Abba Shaul, then he would have said this halacha as the source for kachrim to be revi. Because like Rashi explains, because this teaches us two chedushim. First of all, it teaches us the halacha of oichel bo machmas tvul yoim, that it's going to make a revi b'kachrim because he holds like Abba Shaul, and it teaches us a shlish that comes because of the b'sheni, that they make revi b'kachrim. Which Rashi explains that although a chamishi by kodesh, he doesn't say that you learn out like we did by Tvul Yoim. There he says the ma'il derabanan, and that's talking about kodesh from kodshim. Revi he's talking about on a biblical level, but al kapanim revi he would hold that you would say. So therefore, it can't be like Abba Shaul because then he would have said the source like from Abba Shaul's halacha. And if you're going to say, okay, no, it's not difficult. Because you can't learn out the Kabbalah from there. Why? From the Ikla Mirfah, because you could ask, it's not true, Malat Tvul Yom, I wouldn't know the halacha of Kikar Shlishi from there. Because I could tell you, a Tvul Yom, Shekin Avatuma. It's not true, I wouldn't know that. A Tvul Yom, even though, in a way, he's less, and if you want to say, oh, it would be a Kabbalah because, you know, he's not a problem for Chulin and Ma'aser Sheni, and yet he makes a kachim b'revi for sure. Kikar Shlishi would come from Kikar Sheni, which is a problem for Chulin for sure should make kachim b'revi. It's not true because what are you trying to learn that from a Tvul Yom? A Tvul Yom, the Ma'aser, he was a Avatoma before he toivel. Maybe over there you can make kachim b'revi. Says the Gemara, name that wouldn't be a pircha because ha'isine. Rabbi Yisrael himself brings from a Kabbalah Chaimim Mechusik Kippurim. His own source is from Mechusik Kippurim. You could ask the same thing. Mechusik Kippurim was also Avatoma beforehand. And V'loi Pircha, and he doesn't ask such a question. Rabbi Yisrael is not considered that as a Pircha, because like Rashi explains, because Amais is the person table now. Amais that Tumah is not here anymore. So you're not an Avatoma anymore. Whatever you are, Rish, Nashin, whatever you are. And therefore, Rabbi Yisrael held, it is Chuvas B'tzidai. Because you cannot be like Abba Shaul, because if you were like Abba Shaul, you would have said like Abba Shaul, not Loi from Mechusik Kippurim, you would have learned it from Oichal Bo Machmas Tvul Yoim, as Rashi explained why that's better. And since you didn't, must be you don't like Abba Shaul. Then you means you hold like the Chacham. If you hold like the Chachamim, and if that's not the source for Revi B'Kachim, then actually it slugs up your halacha. Obviously, we don't make such a Kabbalah Chaimim, because in that case of Oichal Bo Machmas Tvul Yoim, you don't say that if it's going to make Truma possible, it'll make Kachim into one step further into Revi. But according to you, then how the Chacham should have said it does? Obviously, it doesn't. So therefore, that was Rabbi Yechanan's question on Rabbi Yisrael. He says, the Tambaribi that he wants to say that you have a halacha of Kachim becoming Revi, and you know it from a Chusik Kippurim, ich verstehe nicht sein Svara. It's not true, as you see from the halacha of Chacham, who he holds like, they don't say such a thing. You don't say automatically if something is an apostle by Truma, that it's a shlish that's going to make the kachim into the next level, and that's where the Gemara ends. Thank you to any time.
I know why you